one of the best singers, one of the best looking motherfuckers you've ever seen.
Now, not to be mean about someone who has passed away, but Dave Chappelle isn't sugarcoating details about Rick James, exposing the singer for his disturbing past.
I'm Rick James.
So, if you have ever tuned into Comedy Central, you might have come across the unsettling truth about being next to Rick James, revealed by Charlie Murphy, who seems to be holding similar feelings as Dave.
If I was hanging with Rick, he had this thing with me where he used to always like with me, man. I don't know what started it.
The details, well, least to say they are disturbing. Quite recently, a New York woman who wishes to remain anonymous has filed a lawsuit against the late musician Rick James, alleging that he assaulted her when she was only 15 years old, back in 1979. Now, if you are wondering how the case is going to proceed, given the alleged perpetrator has already passed away, the Child Victims Act of 2019, which extended the statute of limitations for survivors of child sexual abuse to come forward, will most probably be applying to this case. According to reports, the woman filed an affidavit in Erie County Supreme Court detailing an incident in the spring of 1979. She says that Rick James paid a visit when she was being held at a juvenile prison facility. The women at the center were not familiar with him, unlike the other girls there. She recalls feeling uncomfortable when James began making suggestive remarks almost immediately upon arrival.
I'm Rick James. It's the celebration.
Moving forward, the complainant claims that she went to her room to read after this disturbing exchange. Rick James then allegedly entered her bedroom as she was lying face down on her bed and pinned her there. He seized her by the hair and pressed her head into the cushion, warning her to keep quiet or risk physical damage. He then engaged in illicit activity without her consent and threatened to harm her further if she told anyone. According to the plaintiff's own statement, "I did not know who Rick James was and shrugged and said I don't know him. Almost immediately, Rick James was very suggestive and inappropriate towards me. He made me feel very uncomfortable." Then, she continued in her statement, expressing, "As I was laying on my belly on my bed, Rick James came into my bedroom and he grabbed my hair and pushed my head into the pillow. I tried to fight him off, but he told me, 'Shut up and quit moving or I'll cut you.' He violently and proceeded to violently me and inside of me." Additionally, the unidentified plaintiff alleges she suffered severe bodily, psychological, and emotional trauma as a result of the claimed occurrence. She has struggled with things like alcoholism, drug addiction, depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts as a result. The woman is also seeking $50 million in damages. The James Ambrose Johnson Jr. 1999 Trust, which is handling the late singer's estate, has been formally subpoenaed by the court. Now, let's not forget that Rick James had a history of illicit misconduct allegations against him. He was found guilty of attacking 2 women in 1993. In 1991, James and his then-girlfriend Tanya Ann Hijazi were arrested for the alleged 3-day abduction and torture of a 24-year-old woman at James's Hollywood Hills home. Not to forget, in 1993, while out on bail, he assaulted Mary Sauger, an executive at a record label, while he was high on cocaine. Sauger said he and Tanya Hijazi kidnapped and beat her for 20 hours after meeting the executive for a business meeting. James was found guilty of both charges, yet he avoided the death penalty because he was exonerated on the torture count. While incarcerated for the first 2 years of his 5-year term, he also lost a civil suit to Sauger and was eventually required to pay her $1 million. James went to state prison for nearly 2 years for these convictions, but he was eventually exonerated of torture charges. An incident at his house was also reportedly being investigated back in 2002. Though the singer passed away soon after, in 2004, Dave Chappelle has come forward highlighting how the singer kept contaminating the world while he was alive, humiliating, torturing, and subjecting women to his explicit, non-consensual actions. Dave Chappelle also believes that despite his success, Rick James has managed to keep up his reputation as a troublemaker. What was once considered controversial is today more likely to be considered dangerous. Because of the singer's openly explicit songs and his unquenchable desire for personal connection, it was difficult for the mainstream to fully accept him as an artist. But even then, he established a passionate following among the people who lived on the margins of society. Of course, it's simple. You attract who you are. As per Chappelle's account of Rick James, in 1989, with the release of James's 11th album, Kickin', problems started to get worse and eventually escalated. As a result of the record's poor performance in the United Kingdom, the sole territory in which it was made available for purchase and download, James was released from his contract with Warner Brothers the following year. Following that, James's substance misuse had progressed from using marijuana when he was a teenager to using heroin and cocaine by the time he reached this point in his career. So basically, in the late 1980s, he was freebasing crack cocaine in his Beverly Hills estate. Now, in a move that can only be described as cracky, he even used tin foil to screen himself from curious eyes in his attempt to hide his drug use. So there's that. Meanwhile, Dave Chappelle, through the medium of his sketch comedy show, seemed to be quite helpful in restoring James's career, even in the middle of these obstacles. But even then, many people think that this was Dave's way of exposing Rick's true nature as an individual and warning society of how messed up his company could be. According to reports, James made an appearance in the skit titled Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, in which Dave Chappelle portrayed James and acted out Charlie Murphy's yarns, notably shouting the line, "I'm Rick James," in the process. James also played a part, offering narration for the stories and frequently punctuating them with the phrase, "cocaine is a drug," both of which James was famous for. So, even if you think Dave was making Rick relevant, he was expressing a vivid representation of James's darker side through the use of comedy and humor, which enabled audiences to obtain a deeper understanding of the late singer's complicated character. Not to mention, a while ago, Dave Chappelle also had an intriguing idea up his sleeve. He was on the verge of recording a movie on Rick James, in which he would play the role of the late singer in order to accurately represent the troubled life that he had led.
Right when we was talking about doing a movie.
Really?
Yeah, he had written this book.
Well, he had to be thrilled.
Then again, the plot took an unexpected turn. During a conference call, Chappelle revealed that Rick wanted to handle this project delicately. But what exactly did he intend by those words? Well, it ended up being a really serious cause for concern, as it turned out. Chappelle admitted that he had an initial feeling of frustration about the situation because they were so close to finalizing the agreement. Yet, there was a deeper reason behind his reluctance. Chappelle noted that Rick James's primary concern was not with the movie itself, but rather with how it would be received by his children. It appears that James was also concerned about the potential implications of this representation for his legacy.
Right when we was getting ready to make the deal, he had second thoughts. Like, we had a conversation. He's like, there's certain elements of my life that I don't want to handle. But then it turned out, and it's kind of deep. He was worried about what his kids would think.
As a result, Dave claims that it became a powerful moment in the plot that drove home how difficult and personal it was to adapt Rick James's story for the big screen. But even for Chappelle, in the months that followed the Rick James event, it was driving him almost completely insane. While he was out and about, people were shouting, "I'm Rick James!" And because of all of that, and because it's difficult to know what to do in a situation like that, he began to spiral downward. Since then, he has, as expected, avoided public attention as much as possible. Still, Chappelle claims that there was this one time when he poked his toe out of a limousine, and all of a sudden he was surrounded by people. He was unable to understand how they could possibly have known he was in the car, but the fact that they did made him feel quite overwhelmed. So if we are to be completely honest, it seems as though Rick James' personality is tied down and cursed in such a way that if someone tries to bring up the evil that he has done, it begins to surround them and gets to them, causing them to lose their own sanity and fame in the process. Because it was during this time that even Oprah pointed out how Chappelle was losing his calm. And even though it is crucial for Chappelle to reveal the truth, he still wishes to keep his distance and let other people decide for themselves what they think about the later singer. That's all for the video, folks. Thanks for watching.